We have a special report from 4 News Now's Aaron Luna. He's going to have some home buying tips, how to improve your credit score. It's a scary process. Aaron is here to lend a helping hand. So let's go ahead and bring him in with his tips and tricks. Aaron Luna, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing great. So what can you tell me about your special report?
Well, first off, just want to say this is not financial advice.
Oh, good. Are you legally required to say that?
I'm not sure, but I'm going to say it just in case. I'm not giving out financial advice. We talk to experts, and every expert's going to tell you a little something different. We talk to a home buyer as well to find out what process he's going through. And so I just figured I'd throw that out there just to cover my bases. But we did find out a couple of different things. First off, when we're talking about a credit score is kind of made up of 5 different categories. The big ones are going to be your basic payment history. That makes up 35% of your credit score, right? Then another 30% is the amount that you owe people. So what's on your credit card, if you have a car loan, things like that. Then new credit's about 10%. 15% is like the length of your credit history. So how long have you been paying on those debits or those debts, how long you've been accruing credit. And then just the 10% is like a credit mix, which involves a lot of other things as well. So if you're getting into the home buying process, a lot of people coming out of the pandemic, right? Some people weren't able to work. Maybe you had a couple of bills that you weren't able to pay because you didn't have the solid income coming in. Your credit score might be a little dinged, right? And credit scores, basically, you have 850 on the top end, and you can go all the way down to a 0 credit score. And 0 credit score doesn't mean like you're the worst. It may mean that you have just no credit. You have no credit cards. Maybe you're a young person, or you just pay everything in cash, so you have no credit. So when I was talking to Chad Thomas, who is the regional manager for Q Home Loans in Spokane, we kind of went through the basic steps that he takes his client through to get the best possible interest rate on a home loan. And so what he does first, does a soft credit pull. Basically, that's not going to show up on your credit score. He's going to look at that, and then once he gets that number, he's going to be able to plug it into a couple of calculators and figure out specific things to say, if you do this, this, and this, you're going to improve your credit score. And he was telling me that most people who go through the program, almost a good, at least 100%, in certain circumstances, have the ability to raise their credit score by 80 points in some cases.
So it's really just about educating people about what they can do.
Yeah, there's easy steps that everyone can take. So the first step would be, after you get that that soft credit pull, to find out where you're at. And if you have a high credit score, which Experian lists a high credit score like 749 is very good, up to the 800, and then 800 850 is the top of the line. So you're kind of just looking at where your credit score falls in those little tiers, if you will. So if you are kind of like 750 and above, there's really not much you can do to improve the number, like your interest rate on your home loan, because you're kind of in that tier. But let's say you're kind of down in the 699 range, and you just need to bump up your credit score to that 760 or above if possible. There are things you can do, and it might be kind of obvious for some people. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to pay down a credit card where I have was over the limit. Seems pretty obvious, right?
Sure.
Yeah. That's
don't have too much credit card debt. That's good advice.
Yeah, don't have too much credit card. Goes back to one of those things, like how much 30% of your credit score is how much you owe there. So you're bringing those types of things down. You're reducing your credit, the debt you owe on your credit, and bringing it down past that limit.
So how can you check what your credit score is? I mean, it's not something like you can memorize because it's constantly changing. Yeah. So what are the ways you can go about doing that?
Well, one thing about a credit score is, like, if you're not doing anything about it, let's say you have some old collections on your credit score, and if you don't do anything, you just kind of continue doing what you're doing, your credit score won't fluctuate very much, right? So if you're going to get into something where you're buying a major purchase, you can if you're going to go through a lender, you go to them and say, hey, can I get a soft credit pull? Or you can actually go and get your own credit score through the 3 financial institutions, Experian, Equifax, and I can't think of the other one right now, but they will give you
TransUnion. Does that sound right?
TransUnion, yeah. I don't have it listed in front of me. I was like, of course I can remember.
I know that at the top of my head. I was recently a victim of identity theft, so that was fun.
So you had to go through all that stuff.
About that.
So you can check your credit score on your own, and that kind of gives you the knowledge of, okay, well now I have a base layer or a jumping off point on where I want to be. And then when you're working with a lender, you can say, well, you're going to get a better interest rate, or we can work with you a little bit more if we just bring that credit score up, let's say 40 points, 60 points, 80 points, 100 points. So you start paying down those credit cards that are over your limit, right? You bring your debt down a little bit. And then here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Some people might think, oh, I've got an old collection on my credit score. I'm just going to go ahead and pay that off. Sounds right. And you're like,
Sure.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, if you got
Why not?
money you owe, pay it.
Pay it, right? Well, in the short term, that actually might do more damage than good. It's like in the long term, paying off those collections, great idea. Your credit score is going to be, your credit's going to be healthier in the long run. But in the short term, you might erase that debt, and that might actually drop your credit score. And you want a higher credit score in, the next 2 to 3 months, like 1, 2, or 3 months, because you're applying for that home loan. So that's something you want to really consider, because it depends on when that collection has been reported.
Okay,
So
that makes more
if
sense.
you pay that off, and then like, oh, you've reduced you've taken that collection and you've reduced it so it doesn't show up on your reporting, then your credit score is going to drop. In the long term, it's going to be better for you and it's going to help you out. But in the short term, you might not want to do that. So that's something you want to talk to your lender about.
Got it.
As well.
If you're a young man like myself, maybe you're recently married like myself, and your wife maybe wants to move out of an apartment into a house, what are some ways that I can go about either improving my credit score to get a better interest rate on my loan or saving money for that big ticket purchase?
Yeah, I mean, everyone can do these simple things, right? We talked about paying off your credit card debt, talking to a lender, getting pre-approved if you're buying a house is huge. And that's where the credit score comes into play almost immediately, because then you're going to want to find out, well, what am I going to pay on an interest rate? And right now, as you know, interest rates have been raised by the Fed over, 10 consecutive times. The last one was just in March.
I think we had a article on our web this morning saying it's as high as it's been since mid-March right now.
Right. Yeah. So you don't want to pay a lot of interest rate, because that's compounded over the length of your home loan. If you're also trying to build credit, and let's say, you're a young man who doesn't have a lot of credit, you can actually go to your lender and you can get what's called a secure credit card. And so that is when you give them, let's say, $300. Then they issue you a credit card for $300. That gives you that $300 max on there. Then you use that credit card for simple things over the next 2 to 3 months. This process takes a little bit longer because it's not something you can do like in that 30-day time period where you're approved for a home loan and then you try to bring your credit score up as high as possible. This takes a little bit longer because you need to make that credit history. But what it does, it allows you to use some credit, and it's already being paid off because you put that money forward, and then it goes to your payment history, and that starts bringing your credit score up. So if you have a little bit of time to work with, that's a good way to do it as well. Now, let's say your credit score is already good. Like you already have, something that the lender's like, well, you're in that top tier. Your interest rate is pretty much going to be, 8.2 or whatever your lender is working with you on that specific number. Then you come into a position where you can buy down points. That's a whole different ball game. But a lot of people are doing this right now. The buyer I talked to, Ryan Johnson, he was saying, he doesn't buy houses very often, but the last one we bought was 16 years ago, and now he's buying another home, and he was just shocked that he was actually buying down points. And then Thomas with Q Home Loans was saying, in his 30 years in the business doing that, he's told people multiple times, never pay the points. Never pay points to bring down your interest rate. But now that's just where the market is. And it's kind of a situation where, well, let's just real quick talk about what it is buying down your interest rate. So you take a percentage of your overall loan, say 1%, and you put that down to bring and that might drop you 0.75%, depending on what lender and bank you're working with. So that way
you're paying less over time.
That's the key. You pay a little bit more money up front, less over time to bring that interest rate down. And both of these guys I talked to, they were surprised that this is the way it's going, but that's just kind of the market we're in, and that's what people are doing to save a good chunk of change over the long term. The thought process, what Chad was saying, banks typically lose money in the first 2 years when they, lend money for a home purchase. And there's speculation, now this is just speculation, Rob, that the Fed is probably going to either drop interest rates a little bit or start leveling it out in the next, in June is the next bump that they're going to look at. But then by December, there's some thought process that rates might actually come down, which would encourage people to refinance their homes. And once again, by not financial advice, but this is the speculation that I've heard from some lenders and people I talk to. So they're saying, okay, buy down banks wanting you to buy down those points now, because if you're just going to refinance in December, then they're going to lose a little bit more money. So what they want to do is front load that loan to you. They want to get more money up front, cuts down their loss in the first part of that home loan, and then you go back and refinance, and so you're bringing that interest rate down over the long term. So that's kind of the thought process going into that right now. Different than a lot of people have seen in quite some time, but that's what people are telling us.
Sure. Well, it's absolutely fascinating, Aaron, and I'm glad you're here to ease the stresses of the community and at least offer a helping hand to be like, hey, let me sort of break it down for you. So I personally appreciate the help.
Well, it's one of those things that there are certain things you can do, and you talk to your lender, talk to someone you trust, and they can get that credit score and plug it into a calculator that says if you do A, B, and C, you can raise your credit score to a certain amount. And that just gives you kind of, like I said before, a jumping off point to, start the process of, if you're buying a home, that's a huge process. And it just makes it simpler. So you have the steps. So you're not going out there and thinking to yourself, oh gosh, it's going to be this huge expense over this long period of time. There's ways to manage it. Most lenders they're going to find a way to get you approved for a loan. It's up to you to just figure out, what can I afford? What do I want? And, how do I make that American dream part of my reality?
Well, can't think of a better way to end it. Aaron Luna, thank you so much for your time. Aaron's special report will air tonight in 4 News Now at 6, and then it'll be on our website if you miss it on TV at KXLY.com. Aaron, anything else you want to add before I let you go?
Don't make any major purchases. If you're in the market for a home and you're starting to secure that home loan, don't go out and buy a new car. Some people have done that, and then they
one at a time.
They realize that now I'm not approved for that loan that I thought I was going to get because I've got this extra debt that wasn't on the books beforehand. So focus on one thing at a time, step by step. Talk to someone you trust. Talk to a lot of people. It makes a difference.
Appreciate your time, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
And like I said, Aaron's special report will be airing tonight in 4 News Now at 6. And it'll be up on our website, KXLY.com, along with this interview if you missed some of it or want a little inside information. We like to do these exclusive one-on-one chats where the person who's doing the special report can really dive deeper into what they're working on.